What's going on, everybody? Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and whatever time it is. Welcome back to another video with your man, Measureholic. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 3 of my Parthian campaign for the Divided Impera overall mod for Total War Rome 2. Ladies and gentlemen, first off, I want to apologize for having this video come out a little bit later than what was expected. I had to re-record the entire episode, which means at least 4 hours of recording again entirely, which sucked. But I got it done, and here you are. And also, of course, thank you guys for the continued support. I really appreciate it. Who does not appreciate it, though, is the Atropatanians. They're coming at us very hard here. We have absolutely no time for any more introduction. We are fighting for the continuation of the Parthian exile right now, ladies and gentlemen. So here we are in the settlement of Armavir. This is in northeastern Armenia at the present time. This is it for us. We do have the settlement of Thrapsa, but that's basically non-existent at this point. All of the Parthian people who have migrated with us are here. And as such, we'll be beginning the battle, by sending our cavalry out of the town and keeping our infantry inside to try and hold the citadel for as long as possible. They have a lot of traps set up just in front of them to hopefully lure the Atropatanian cavalry into attacking us here. However, things are looking really bleak. They have a very good army for countering our heavy cav army. They have a lot of cavalry themselves, and then they have a lot of spears, the majority of which are actually spear archer units, which are insanely helpful. And the traps aren't really going to be all that useful, despite them running in straight into stakes here. The Atropatanians charge on in and engage our spearmen and other infantry at the citadel without much issue with the traps. However, as the battle continues here, our horse archers are now on the edge of town, and they're trying to basically draw out elements of the enemy cavalry and infantry on their own before the entire enemy army captures the town and then chases the rest of our cavalry. It works out fairly well for the most part. Their cav does engage with ours, however they're separated and isolated from the army, and as such will actually be able to decimate quite a good chunk of the enemy cavalry before their infantry can catch up. And this will be how we dissect at least a good 2 of the 3 units of the enemy cavalry, which will be insanely helpful because they had quite a bit at the beginning of the battle. Then the enemy infantry catches up, but since we're all on horseback now, it's going to be incredibly easy for us to just maneuver slightly out of their range and continue keeping up our missile volley on them. I am splitting up the cavalry army into 2 pretty much, but I will try to keep it fairly close together. I don't want to be having to try and micromanage battles across the map, and it works out fairly well so far. But one thing that we do, however, is we use our melee cavalry to come in and charge infantry units that aren't spearmen, such as these petty levy swordsmen here. Since they were out ahead of the other infantry on their own, we managed to charge in with some of our shock cav, and as such we will rout them entirely. So that's going to be very nice. So we're going to be taking basically a lot of targets of opportunity there to try and cut them down. Speaking of opportunities, we then catch the enemy's cavalry off guard while they were chasing us down. This is one of their shock cavalry units as well, so it'll be super useful trying to take them out. If we can take them out, then hopefully we can just surround the enemy infantry and obliterate them, but it's very easier said than done. The enemy infantry continues to catch up, though. They're basically abandoning their assault on the town. We even had a few infantry elements survive in there, which will come out and join us shortly. But in the meantime, I'm just focusing entirely on our cavalry maneuvers. So our cav is continuing to charge into the enemy here. We're basically just trying to get them routed. I'm not even looking to obliterate them and wipe out the units. We're just trying to get them routed. If we can rout the units in time, then we'll chase them down afterwards. But unfortunately, the enemy just has such a massive army, it's not going to be happening for quite a while. But our cataphracts are doing excellent, as are the Armenian cavalry that we've recruited as mercenaries. They'll be doing massive numbers for us, so we'll be trying to use them as much as possible. Unfortunately, elements of the enemy cavalry have now reunited with the infantry, and so we're basically facing everything that they have left in their army out here outside the town now, just below the citadel itself. You can see it in the background above. Now here, we're trying to engage the enemy's general. If we can kill him, that will make routing the enemy units way more easy for us. Unfortunately, though, he's a very tough bugger. He's in a very heavy skirmisher cavalry bodyguard unit, and as such, we won't even actually be able to get him here, even though he was separated from his army quite a bit. So we will back off, and we'll have to try again shortly, but the enemy infantry is just getting too close to us, unfortunately. We do manage to rout another cavalry unit though, but the general is still alive and well, and our cavalry are now running out of ammunition pretty much entirely across the board now. The noble archer cav that we do have had a couple more shots left, but for all intents and purposes, all of our cavalry are now engaging in melee, and that won't be changing anytime soon. Unfortunately, we don't have any supply units just yet, and no baggage trains for our army. So instead, we retreated very far away from the enemy, and we now are presenting basically a small little ambush for them. We have cavalry on the right and left hand sides of the plains here. Then in the center, we now have our infantry, or what's left of it, at the front. And then behind them, we have some shock cavalry just waiting and trying to rest up a little. This is what little we have left of our infantry, though, and they're going to get annihilated. I'm not expecting anything but for them to basically tire out the enemy a little bit. But more importantly, I want the enemy to waste our arrows on them, and as you can see here, they are sending volley after volley after volley straight into our infantry, which is absolutely fine with me. Our infantry is pretty subpar overall, and not only that, but all of the units are on the verge of breaking, so we may as well just let them go. But shortly after that happened, we then did basically a massive cavalry charge across the right hand flank and the center. Our center actually flanked in and managed to circle around some of the left-hand flank of the enemy's units. So as such, we will get some very nice charges in. However, it won't be enough to rout many of them. We'll only get maybe 1 or 2 units routed out of the many that are still left. And we'll actually take quite a few casualties here. I left my cavalry in an engagement for quite a while, just really trying to hope to rout as much as I could, but it didn't work out. So what we're going to focus on instead is hunting down the enemy's general. He's in a cavalry unit on the hill in the distance, riding among the groves right now underneath our citadel. So what we're doing is we're sending in the Shah Arsikis, along with some very heavy cataphract units that he has, and the Armenian mercenaries. And basically we're going to engage the enemy's arch unit that they have left, and we're going to engage the enemy general. And there we have a massive clash right there. The enemy general charges straight into our cataphracts, but in the meantime we're dealing with the enemy skirmishers unit that they have left, and then we will be focusing entirely on the general. We've got to kill him. If we can kill him, then we'll make routing these low tier units that we're going up against a whole new world of easier. It's just so vital that we kill the general to make this tactic work. And keep in mind, we're now entirely out of out of friendly infantry. We're also entirely out of ammunition. All this is coming down to now is charging the enemy as much as possible. And the Shah comes in, he gets a very devastating charge, slightly downhill into the enemy general's position, but unfortunately it's still just not good enough. And the enemy general will hold out for quite a while here. It's freaking insane how long he lasted. Eventually we will be able to rout him off the battlefield, but we had to keep our cavalry stuck in combat for quite a long time. So to try and help him not get engaged by the enemy infantry, we're going to do a complete charge of all of our cavalry into the enemy infantry. Now this is super risky because a lot of the enemy infantry that's left is basically spearmen with very large shields and good melee defense, which means that they'll last quite a while in melee combat, even against our high tier cavalry. This is just super risky across the board, and to be honest, I probably should have played it safer, pulled out my cav, left the enemy general for a bit longer, but I was just really desperate to try and get him, and I thought that we would get him here. However, somehow, even though he's wavering and surrounded by the Shah and his personal elite bodyguards, he will somehow manage to escape, at least for the time being. And so I ended up pulling back all of our cavalry. We still took a lot of casualties though, pretty much across the board. I was kind of surprised that our horse archers didn't take more casualties, although to be fair, not all of them were engaged for all that long. So our cataphracts and heavy cavalry in general will be the main sources of casualties for us. Moving forward though, we ended up pulling our cavalry completely away, and then we basically formed what I'm dubbing as the Parthian sandwich. We have cavalry on either side of the enemy's line formation, and now we're just going to smash into them when appropriate. We even managed to get the enemy general off on his own, away from his infantry. He is charging into horse archers, so he'll last quite a while in combat, but now we finally will get him routed from the battlefield. So I'm basically just going to let my horse archers do their thing and kill him, and while they're doing that, we'll be starting to initiate the sandwich chomping on the enemy infantry. They have a single file, basically almost like a column marching against us, and as such the Parthian sandwich begins, where we have our cataphracts hitting the enemy from the front and then horse archers from behind. But what I do is I time it so our horse archers engage the enemy first, they turn around to engage our horse archers, and then our cataphracts charge into the rear and get some beautiful charges against them. It wasn't enough to rout all of the units though, but we did get a couple off the battlefield. However, again, I left my units in extended melee for just a little bit too long, and as such we will take some casualties. However, now we're starting to see some of the enemy units peel off on their own, and as such we'll even get some mini little sandwiches occurring, where the Parthian cataphracts will combine with the horse archers to just annihilate some of these units. And even though they are pretty decent spearmen, some of them, it's just going to be too much for them, and they are going to start to rout once that sandwich is finally completed. Moving forward, we ended up doing one final massive sandwich where we ended up surrounding the enemy infantry. They do kind of charge out and make it a little bit awkward for us, but at this point I know the enemy's morale is low. I know our own morale is low though, so I do need to either do an all or nothing kind of charge here. If we continue just doing little by little charges, probably wouldn't work out for us, since a lot of our horse archers are not far away from routing. So what I'm doing is trying to commit all of them at once, and I'm trying to keep the Shah nearby so he can provide support for his troops when needed. So we ended up routing a couple of units there. Goes very nicely. We pulled out some of our horse archers, and now we're completely committing across the entire board here. And the last remnants of the Atropatanian army are actually going to end up routing completely. As you can see at the bottom though, a lot of our units suffered massive casualties, but it was worth it. The Parthians live on to fight another day, and the Shah gets to continue his exile in Armenia. Here are these stats if you do wish to see them. As you can see, we took some massive casualties ourselves. We had a pretty small army, and taking the amount of losses that we did really is not good. Our spearmen that we even did have in our army did pretty much nothing for us. It all came down to the Armenian mercenaries being super helpful, and then just the rest of our cavalry did pretty fantastic across the board. So we get a Pyrrhic victory against the Atropatanians, but we kill their general and the majority of their army. And while we won't annihilate their army, it will be pretty much close enough. So now we're going to try and consolidate our forces, recruit some more mercenaries just to keep things going. You have to remember, as we migrate into areas that are not of our culture, we'll have very little population to recruit our core army roster from. So as such, we'll have to try to resort to mercenaries or foreign levy units, which is why we had some spearmen there. And then I'll be trying to recruit more spearmen as the campaign continues. And even in the next few turns, actually, we'll be trying to recruit some of the Caucasian spearmen, as they're actually quite good considering that they're a levy unit. They have pretty good melee defense, some armor, large shield, and not too bad of an attack. So we will be trying to rely on them as we continue our march into Armenia. On the left hand side of the screen though, you can see the Armenian remnants themselves of the Armenian kingdom are actually sending a massive army against us. They're not declaring war though, and in fact they're actually going to help us out by dealing with some rebels that have been spawning around the settlement of Armavir. This will be super helpful for us, and I'll use and abuse it as much as I can. And the Armenian army here will actually sit in our territory for a while, but while they do it, they'll be killing rebels for us. So I'm going to take that opportunity now. It's been a few turns and we've got some infantry to try and take the capital of Armenia, which is the city of Tushpa. It's far to the southwest, and it will take us a few turns to march there. And while we're marching that way, Thrapsa gets attacked by a massive Atropatanian army. Even though we could have tried to make the defense a little bit more stalwart and inflict casualties on them. I just kind of figured, screw it. I don't want Thrapsa anyway. And what I do want to do with Thrapsa is actually come back and liberate it so we get some allies soon. So I'm actually really happy that the Atropatanians took the settlement from us, as it was basically just a money sink anyway. Continuing our advance into Armenia though, we have a very big problem occur. We recruit some mercenary spearmen, we're all ready to go, but then the Armenians actually end up besieging the settlement of Tushpa, sorry. And as such, when we can't attack it, and we could join in the fight and help them take it, but we don't want to, because we want Tushpa to be the new seat of our new Parthian exile. So we will have to wait quite a few turns, and we ended up raiding just to try and keep our economy going. Eventually the Armenian army there gave up, and now it's our turn to try and take the capital of Armenia. We don't have the best army for the job, but we absolutely have to win this battle, so let's jump on in and do it. And the battle will begin with archers firing, of course. No better way to start off a Parthian battle than with archers of some sort firing into the enemy. This is a walled settlement, obviously, and as such this will be very costly. And we'll be trying to use our horse archers actually to great effect. I'm actually using the Cantabrian Circle ability down here. I've been testing that out in my latest battles, and you'll see it quite a few times throughout this video. Seems to be pretty helpful in helping your horse archer units avoid receiving fire from enemy skirmishes, and it gives a small reloading buff, so we'll see how that goes. But while they're providing covering fire, we will be moving forward with our mercenary spearmen and our Caucasian spearmen to try and get to the enemy wall. The enemy archers are numerous though, they are starting to target one of our ladders, and we only have two. So if they manage to take out our ladders, that could be a massive problem for us. Thankfully though, they ended up targeting the ladders too late, and as such our spearmen will get onto the walls fairly easily, not take too many casualties. We will even bring up some more spearmen, and our spearmen are actually quite superior to their own, except for two of their more elite units, but their elite units are a little bit more depleted. So basically we just have a very large grind fest to get through here on the walls. We only have two ladders, we can't outflank the enemy, and as such we'll be grinding through them for quite a while, and we do so quite effectively, especially our mercenary Armenian spearmen. They did really good. They cut through the enemy archers, cut through the light infantry quite easily, and we'll be doing fairly well in the grind there. But while that's happening, we'll continue our Cantabrian Circle outside the city. This is now with our noble archers, who have a lot more ammunition than our DeI riders, and while they won't get a massive amount of kills, they are still getting 20, 30, sometimes 40 kills just by doing this, shooting over the wall in the Cantabrian formation. And I believe we only lost one of these horsemen from these noble units while doing this, so it seemed to be worthwhile so far. But I'd like to know your thoughts down below about the Cantabrian Circle ability. But anyway, we continue pushing the enemy infantry off the walls. They're basically now being pushed down the stairs back into the city itself, and our units are doing fantastic. I was really surprised on how effective our Caucasian spearmen were. They are apparently just a levy unit. However, the general of this army is not willing to wait any longer. You notice I'll say general, not Shah. The Shah is actually taking a bit of a break, and we replaced him with one of his loyal noblemen to lead the army here. Basically just so we could actually have a full bodyguard for our general. And the Shah deserves a little bit of a rest anyway in the new capital. But in the meantime, we're continuing pushing the enemy infantry back. We're now moving down into the city. We've pushed them completely off the walls, and we are now even capturing the main gate, which is a massive win for us, because if we take the gate, then we can actually move in our cavalry, which will now be able to outflank the enemy infantry. And as soon as that flag was raised at the gate, this battle is basically over. Here is a last clump of enemy spearmen trying to hold our men from coming out of the doors of the walls here, and it's just too much for them. And when we're just coming with one deadly charge from our Armenian heavy cavalry, it's just too much for them, and they are gone. City of Tushpa is now under Parthian control. And here are the stats, if you do wish to see them. We ended up taking quite a few losses. However, it wasn't too bad because the majority of those losses were basically our spearmen and our one infantry archer unit that we had. So all in all, it was a pretty successful siege, and our mercenary Armenian spears did excellent, so hopefully we'll be able to afford them in the future. We'll now just gently occupy the settlement. We're not looking to cause any issues with public order. We already have massive public order issues, and we'll have rebellions pretty much every second or third turn, which is unfortunate. But thankfully the Armenians over here will still lend us a hand when their armies come through our territory. I'm not sure why they were so keen to help. They were fighting the Atropatanians, so they want to head through our territory and get down into Persia. In addition, they're also fighting the Kartli though, so I was kind of surprised they didn't go up against the Kartli instead. Unfortunately though, despite this and our united stance against the Atropatanians, the Armenians didn't have any interest whatsoever in negotiation with us at all. Furthermore, nobody had any interest at all. Basically, this is just what happens when you play on hard difficulty. Even though you have nations close to you that are friendly, and it makes sense to be friends with them, basically the diplomacy AI is just completely fucked, and you're almost never going to get relations, and that's what we get for playing on hard difficulty though, so it's not a surprise, but I thought I'd just show you what's going on diplomatically. And as you can see, the Bactrians in the east are absolutely massive, and are now actually invading Parthia, which means that they'll become even bigger than what we previously had thought they would be. So that will be our endgame enemy for sure. But what's happening now is that I'm basically giving the cities that we have in Armenia a few turns of reprieve, and I'm basically assigning all of the infantry we have to be a garrison in the city of Tushpa. In the meantime though, the Shah Arsakis is actually going to lead an expedition of his cavalry back east into Persia, into Atropatanian territory, and we're going to try and liberate a couple cities. Like I said, I wanted to liberate Thrapsa, and if we can pull that off, I want to try and liberate Ganzak as well. That would be very helpful. And here we are with the liberation of Thrapsa now commencing. The enemy only has a small garrison, but we only have a very small strike force. So let's see if the Parthian horse archers can do it again. And here we are on the battlefield. This is going to be a very Parthian-esque battle, and I hope you guys enjoy this one in particular. The enemy garrison actually sallied out from the town, so this is just on a regular battlefield map. You'll see this from, well, you'll note this battlefield from a earlier battle that we did in the campaign. However, the enemy infantry has the high ground, and they are just sitting on it. Our left and right hand flanks has our cavalry though that we're sending up to surround them. And in the meantime, our horse archers are basically trying to lure the enemy infantry off the hills. So we're doing some more Cantabrian dancing here, and our horse archers are basically just trying to lure the enemy into pursuing us. For the most part, it works quite well. However, you can see a little panic moment here where I gave an order for the cavalry to move back and they didn't. I had to actually turn the UI back on, turn off Cantabrian, and then we retreated. But all in all, the battle is going pretty friggin' well so far. Our horse archers are doing a lot of damage to the lightly armored troops, although some of their shielded units are doing fairly well against us. So we do need to be careful that we don't get stuck or pinned down by the enemy archers. And as such, or to that end I should say, we are actually about to annihilate them with our cataphracts. Our cataphracts are now flanked on the left and the right hand side completely. They're now basically in the position where the enemy garrison was initially on the hill, and as such they will have an excellent charge bonus as they charge down into the enemy archers here, and will basically annihilate all three of their archer units in a single charge. It's worked out absolutely perfectly. Once we take out these archers, the enemy won't have any long distance capacity against us whatsoever. So what happened after that, looking at the tactical overview, you can see on the left and the right hand flank, our horse archers are moving back up to the north side of the battlefield. On the north side we have all of our cataphracts, and they're basically on top of the plateau that we've been fighting the enemy units on. So now we have the high ground, we have the enemy surrounded with horse archers on the flanks, and they don't have any more archers that they can use against us. So now this is absolutely perfect. We just need to try and bait the enemy into giving us some very nice opportunities to charge downhill against them, and then we'll start to really obliterate some units on the charge. These lightly armored swordsmen you're seeing here are actually going to be ideal for our cataphracts to charge into. Even if it is from the front, it doesn't matter as long as we aren't charging into spearmen. We'll do some pretty devastating damage to them. However, on the right hand side over here, you can see there is still some spearmen and some pretty heavily armored spearmen at the back here. One of them being the captain of the garrison, which is getting annihilated. However, we then do a pretty heavy charge in the center and the right hand side of our battlefield. Basically, we're just charging straight on into some of these militia units that they're using. It's basically just some villagers who have picked up their little kitchen table knives and such, and we'll be able to annihilate them with a single charge from the front, just because these cataphract units we're using are so powerful. In addition to the heavy shock Armenian cavalry that we're using, they're not really cataphracts, but we use them as such, so I'm just calling them cataphracts. But in the meantime, the enemy garrison actually retreats entirely, and I don't mean that they rout, but they're withdrawing back across the battlefield to get away from our position up on the hill, which was really interesting. It was pretty cool to see actually the enemy make that decision, especially even without a general to lead them. So what we're going to have to do though is stop them from getting comfortable, and as such we'll immediately rush up our horse archers to be right next to their infantry, so they're tempted to try and charge us. And while they're busy being distracted by the horse archers, we will move up our cataphracts to come in and initiate the good old Parthian sandwich. We get some more devastating charges against their more heavily armored spearmen now, but even though they are spearmen, it will still be enough to make them crack. Although we will start to take some casualties on charges like this, where I let my cav be stuck for a little bit longer than what I should. But because we managed to time the horse archers getting close to the enemy so well, we've now basically split them off into 3 different little battle groups, with some of these units being entirely on their own. So we're going to focus on taking out the heavy spearmen first, especially the more isolated ones, and then we will begin to dissect the rest of the army. And here we have a big sloppy double Parthian sandwich here. I was a little bit careless with charging at so many units at once, but I didn't care. I just wanted to see a really cool charge, and that's what we got. We managed to cull down the enemy army to just 2 spearmen units trying to survive against our charges now, and unfortunately we were just able to maneuver them in a way that they just didn't stand a chance whatsoever. We completely surrounded them, separated them, which is very important to our charges being successful. And then the Shah himself leads a massive charge downhill against the enemy spearmen, and we'll see some bodies flying in the background. And with that charge, we absolutely annihilate the enemy garrison. They can't take it whatsoever. We're sending the horse archers to help out, and with that, the settlement is now ours. So here are these statistics if you do wish to see them. As you can see, we took almost no casualties whatsoever. Only just over 20 men died during the battle, in exchange for killing over 2,000 of the enemy and taking the settlement of Thrapsa from the Atropatanians. Now, finally, we can actually get some allies, even though we kind of have to force them. We're basically giving the settlement of Thrapsa its own independence, and as such, we will finally, for the first time in this campaign, get some friggin' allies. We haven't even had a non-aggression pact at this point, so hopefully the AI won't be broken and they'll actually be diplomatic with us. We've liberated the people calling themselves Mara, or they're basically a small Persian faction. Now they'll even give us a good bit of money for trade, so that's our first trade agreement of the game as well, I believe. So I'm very ecstatic about that, but I'm very I guess cynical on how helpful these guys will be. I basically just want to experiment and try it out. Again, the Armenians are still not interested in us, as is nobody else. I tried all the other nations around us. Nobody else wants any trade relations whatsoever. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and assault the settlement of Ganzaki against the Atropatanians. I did fight it manually, but I won't bother showing you guys. It was basically the same kind of battle as the one you just saw, except it was in different weather conditions. It was quite foggy, so it even sucked to look at. However, we do take the settlement again with very, very few casualties, which will be very helpful for us. It'll help the army last a little bit longer while it's out in the field before it needs replenishment. And now we will liberate the settlement of Ganzak. Well, Ganzak. Okay, Ganzak.
At your command.
And they get a fairly decent sized army. However, they are just a small Persian army, so the troops aren't really all that great. But we do finally get another trade agreement, so now we're jumping all the way up to 2 friends. I know, we're moving up in the world, ladies and gentlemen. It's crazy, right? It's kind of sad. But anyway, what is also sad is that the Atropatanians have a massive army to the west and to the east. I knew about the one in the east. I was kind of hoping our allies might help us take them out. However, the army being in the west as well shows that they're actually pushing towards Tushpa. And if they tank that, then that would be a massive blow to our economy and just our people overall. We can't really afford to lose any of our settlements that we don't want to. So as such, we will try to recruit infantry there. But before we can recruit any more, the Atropatanians march on our allies at Thrapsa in the east. I could have tried to help them here, but I just didn't think our army could have handled it. And as such, we left the allies to their own devices, and they will basically get wiped out. It won't be an instant occupy, but after this, the Atropatanians will get them in the next turn, unfortunately. So, Thrapsa has already been crushed, basically after a turn. Speaking of being crushed, we do have some rebels to deal with at Tushpa, which is very bad because if I left them there, then they basically become a massive army to help the Atropatanians take our new capital. So we have to auto-resolve them away, which means that we'll waste a lot of men on them. But thankfully, it wasn't too costly, and we'll be able to replace them if we get a turn or two before the enemy army arrives at the city. But I have no idea when the enemy army plans to arrive. They could arrive within a single turn if they wish. So I'm basically crossing my fingers and ending the turn. However, during the end turn, ladies and gentlemen, we get an absolute bombshell dropped on us. As you can see, an agent is marching against our army. And we have a noble death. Ladies and gentlemen, King of Eastern Armenia, former King of Parthia, the Shah, Arsaces I, has now been assassinated. Absolutely out of nowhere, we've now lost our excellent leader. The Persians are on the counterattack, and things have never looked so bleak for the people of Parthia. Thank you all for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I shall see you in the next one.